You are watching 180 hounds being killed per minute, acquiring up to 27 gems per minute, along with 180 hounds teeth per minute, or about infinite meat. Yep, you know what? Infinite everything. But how? Well, we'll explain how in this video, don't you worry. Welcome to the ultimate Varg Farm Design. In this video, we will investigate why the Varg Farm is so absurd by default, but made even more productive by the updates to the game in recent times. The main updates being Wilson being able to transmute gems into other gems, and of course the very powerful new weapon, the Howlitzer, which requires hound's teeth as ammunition. Of course, the original inspiration for a farm utilizing Vargs for me was Gabriel, who we have as a guest in this video. Hello, Gabriel.
Hello.
Gabriel will be popping up occasionally throughout the video, helping us out with tips to improve the Varg Farm design. Put your hands up, don't move! I am Badger the business pig and this is a robbery!
Oh, good heavens.
My gun may be facing the sky, but don't you dare move! I have great aim and can blast your noggin right off your shoulders. Go Warthog steal their design, then we will claim it as our own. No, literally. We will plagiarize it exactly, even though we don't understand the design choices made to build it and therefore don't understand the intricacies of the design nor how to operate it efficiently or improve it. What?
You can't steal that, it's my design.
You are not the grandfather of Don't Starve Together, nor any of its farms, Gabriel. As such, this one now belongs to me. Quick, Warthogs, I don't know how long it will take until these two goobers realize this gun isn't loaded. What? Huh? Wait, Warthogs, no, it isn't safe. The hounds aren't baited yet.
Oh, good heavens.
Warthogs, no, good grief. You two, don't move. This is heavy. Man, I'll think of all the gems I'm gonna get. If I make enough gems up, maybe I can buy back my wife's love. I got it. Fools, the farm is mine. My boss will be so delighted. Your boss? Who do you work for? The Bread 666. Okay, I'm leaving now. Goodbye. Oh, nice. Varg Hound. Oh, wait, hold on. I forgot to ask something. Oh, wait, guys, before I leave, I have a question. Do you guys know where else I could build a Varg farm? Lunar Island? Yeah, Don't Starve Pocket Edition. But do you know where I can play that?
What?
That's right, on the new Red Magic 9 Pro gaming phone. Red Magic has returned to give me their brand new Red Magic 9 Pro gaming phone to try out, so I put it through its paces by playing Don't Starve Pocket Edition again. This time it will not defeat me, surely. Red Magic also sent me a backpack, and in the phone's packaging was a hot anime girl. Whoa! So, the goal. Try to find a Varg and replicate a very old Varg farm design, but in single player. And when a Varg does spawn, I will be able to spot it easily due to the Red Magic 9 Pro's full display with BOEQ9 plus luminescent materials with 93.7% body ratio. Do I know what bioluminescent material? No. My adventure began, and I quickly found my first dirt pile. I followed it, and we found a koala. Well, you know, perhaps the next hunt will have better luck then. No, another koala. Okay, well, maybe the third time's the chap. Nope, another koala. But then, on my fourth hunt, I found Maxwell's door because I lied. There was no fourth hunt. So I jumped into adventure mode and found myself in the King of Winter again? Oh, not again. This is what happened last time we got a Red Magic spot, so I got dumped straight into King of Winter. This is so unfair. Good thing the Red Magic 9 Pro has the biggest battery yet with 80 watts super fast charging, so I could be gaming for hours on end within adventure mode without the phone perishing. And yes, it really does make that race car sound effect when it fast charges. I did not add that sound effect in. The phone may not have perished, but I, unfortunately, did. And so, Don't Starve Pocket Edition wins again. Perhaps next time, Pocket Edition. Perhaps next time. So if you want a new gaming phone for Christmas, then maybe if you're really fast, you might be able to order it and get it before Christmas. I'm not sure. Otherwise, check out Red Magic and their new phone, the 9 Pro. And thanks to Red Magic once again for sponsoring the channel for a second time. Very cool. So what do you guys think? Go away. Fine, I got what I came for anyway. You guys are always so mean to me.
Oh, heavens.
Let me just like my wife. Well, I guess we'll have to rebuild the Varg farm now. But that actually works out nicely, as now we can show this nice viewer how to build and operate the farm.
Wow, epic. I love the viewers. I love this viewer. Yeah, this one in particular.
So let's get started with, why a Varg farm? Well, the Varg farm produces 3 key materials, well technically 4. Red and blue gems, monster meat, and hound's teeth. In the past, this farm's high production productivity wasn't super useful, as what would you do with infinite red and blue gems? I guess you can make lots of fire and ice staffs along with some purple gems while getting lots of eggs with the monster meat and maybe craft some tooth traps with the hound's teeth, but this wasn't too useful. The two major updates have turned this farm into an absurd produce machine. The red and blue gems you get from killing fire and ice hounds can be given to a Wilson with his gem transmutation skills unlocked on his skill tree. This way he can turn the mounds of red and blue gems into any other gem. So you want a yellow gem? That'll cost you 9 red and 9 blue gems. A green gem? That'll cost you 27 red and 27 blue gems. But why is transmuting all the red and blue gems into other gems so valuable? Well, if you transmute gems into green gems, you can use the green gems to craft construction amulets and deconstruction staffs from the ruins, which can be used to duplicate recipes, allowing you to get infinite of basically every resource. So wear a construction amulet, craft a Thulsite body for example, then deconstruct it with a deconstruction staff. Good job, you just duplicated some nightmare fuel and Thulsite. Do this with any recipe that requires at least 2 of a resource by default, and you'll duplicate the resources at the cost of the green gems. The second reason is the Howlitzer, a new ranged weapon which is a very rare and powerful type of weapon in Don't Starve Together, but not only that, it deals great damage, 34 physical and 34 planar damage, totaling 68 damage, which is the same as the Dark Sword, but the Howlitzer of course attacks at a range. The big drawback with the Howlitzer is the amount of hound's teeth it requires to use it consistently. This either means you need to ration how often you use it and let your natural hound waves fuel your hound's teeth needs, which is very slow, or you just use a Varg Farm. A general Varg Farm in winter will generate you more than 180 hound's teeth per minute, whereas a Howlitzer will use 120 hound's teeth per minute if you're constantly shooting it at 2 attacks per second, so a Varg Farm can easily sustain a Howlitzer's ammunition needs. Lastly, monster meat. This part of the productivity of the farm hasn't changed. The monster meat can be fed to a bird for eggs to be used to make crockpot dishes like or you can leave the monster meat on the floor to rot, to be used to fertilize plants, farms, or used for other crafting recipes. Also, they did introduce new egg recipes, like the omelets and stuff, so yeah, bugging a bunch of eggs into the crockpot does actually make something useful now. So that's why we want to make the Varg Farm, but now let's very briefly explain how it works, and then later we will talk about the design choices and deeper mechanics of the farm. So the basic design for a Varg Farm is abusing an ability the Varg has, which is its Howl ability. This ability allows the Varg to call and spawn a variable amount of hounds every 15 seconds, so the Varg effectively produces an unlimited supply of hounds. Now, special hounds. On and after day 15, special hounds have a chance to spawn in hound waves, but also from Vargs, these being fire and ice hounds depending on the season. These fire and ice hounds drop red and blue gems respectively at a drop rate of 20%, along with dropping more hounds teeth than normal hounds. Once the Varg spawns its hounds, you will use Winona's Catapult's area of effect damage and a blockade of statues to kill the spawn hounds before the Varg summons more hounds using another howl. This howl, like I said, has a 15-second cooldown. Of course, we don't want the Vargs themselves to die to the catapult, so we'll need to trap them outside of the catapult's range and then some, but we'll talk more about this later. This also means you will need a Winona to build her catapults for the farm. Simple farm concept, right? Except with only one Varg, you'll be consuming 1 gem to fuel your catapults for every 1 to 2 gems that you get, which means you might not even profit any gems. So we must increase the amount of Vargs in our farm to make it more productive to get to that before mentioned 27 gems per minute. So how many Vargs should you use? Well, to determine how many Vargs we should use, first we need to figure out what is the limiting factor to this farm. Is it the catapult's DPS? Do they do enough damage to kill all the hounds before the Varg's howls come off cooldown? Is it the amount of hounds being spawned by the Vargs? Are not enough being spawned? Are too many being spawned? Well, it's actually none of these things. The ultimate limiting factor to the farm is your computer. Let me explain. There will be lots of hounds running around with even more hounds teeth on the floor, causing a tremendous amount of server lag and probably some client lag, dropping your FPS. And of course, if your server is lagging, 60 real life seconds will actually be less than 60 seconds on the server due to the lag, causing the farm to be less effective the more lag you have. So this design, which holds 40 Vargs, looks extremely productive, and it technically does produce more gems per real life minute than a farm with 16 Vargs, but in reality, you won't use this many Vargs, since firstly it would take a while to acquire that many Vargs from hunts in the first place, but also when you run the farm, it will be basically unplayable with how much lag it will inflict so quickly to both your server and you, the player. So we will be ignoring incredibly high Varg count designs, because as fun as it was figuring out how to fit 40 Vargs in this design without anything going wrong on stream, it simply isn't practical. So for the purposes of this guide and for actual practical application, we tested how many Vargs a Don't Starve Together server from Nodecraft can handle at once, while also having multiple players in the server, in different areas including the caves without lagging. The server we used in particular is the Omega server, which Nodecraft gave to me for free, and full transparency, I am partnered with them, so you can use my code Jakey to get 30% off your own game server. But this serves as a good testing point, as Nodecraft's Omega server will be as powerful for me as it is for you, no matter how powerful or weak your own local computer is. So after stress testing the server, we found that 16 Vargs with 1 person in the caves and 2 people on the surface doesn't start lagging the server until the farm has been running for longer than 20 minutes. So that is the number of Vargs we will be using in our design. Now it's time to actually show how to build the design. design, how to pack the Vargs into their enclosures, and finally how to operate the farm. Then we will talk about some crunching mechanics which are very important to understand, as they could make the difference between getting between 0 or 27 gems per minute. And we'll discuss how the different seasons and locations affect how much of each loot you'll get, but we'll come back to that later. Firstly, location. Where should we build the Varg farm? Basically, you just need an open empty area which measures 26 tiles wide and 20 tiles high. That is very big. We'll call this the outside perimeter. The farm itself will only be about 12 tiles wide and 6 tiles high in the middle of the outer perimeter. We'll call this area the farm, but the outside perimeter engulfing the farm will ensure nothing interrupts the farm. This includes water, as hounds will spawn close to the edge of the outside perimeter, and if there's water within that boundary, then the hounds will spawn in water, causing them to swim to get out of the water, which reduces the hounds' movement speed substantially, meaning it will take the hounds longer to get to the farm and therefore take longer to get killed by the catapults, which means you'll kill less hounds overall. Typically, this ideal location will be in your world savannah, which is big, open, and doesn't have many obstacles except beefalo, grass, and bunnies, all of which can be removed. It also doesn't have any moose goose nest spawns, but any biome works, and water can be filled in by using dock kits, which can be unlocked by giving bananas to Monkey Queen or Monkey Island out to sea.
Jakey, wait! Make sure that there's a wormhole close to the farm, or at least within your outside perimeter. This will make the farm way more efficient.
Oh really? How so?
I'll explain later, but just trust me. Make sure a wormhole is close to the farm, okay? Okay.
Okay then. Well, I guess this area looks good. It's big enough and has a wormhole close by. This is the following of what you'll need to fully build this whole farm. 126 walls, 6 gates, 2 flinger mags, 1 Winona G.E.M.erator, 8 Winona catapults, 168 rocks, 84 of either cutstone, moonglass, or marble, 2 more cutstone, 2 drying racks, a fridge and or a salt box, and lastly 15 chests. You might need more stuff than this. I don't know, I can't count. Now that we've found where we're going to build this farm, let's get started. I will be describing the build as if you kept your camera position consistent, pointing northeast so that your tiles are square shaped, not diamonds. You do this by joining the game and rotating your camera once to the right, such that left to right is the width and widest part of the entire farm, and up to down is the height of the entire farm. So yeah, this is the default camera orientation unless I specify otherwise. The characters you need for this build is just Winona, but also a friend. That's right, you'll need a second player to help you pack the Vargs into their enclosures, but we'll be doing that a lot later. Otherwise, a Wolfgang will be helpful to move the statues at a faster speed, but not required. The central part of this farm is called the Catapult Safe Zone. So let's first start by marking turf to make sure our build will actually fit the area we've chosen, and that the wormhole won't block our structures. This might seem unnecessary, but we don't want to be halfway through building and then realize the wormhole is blocking a crucial structure. Start by marking the central location for the safe zone being the 4 most central tiles. Ideally, you want the wormhole to be 4 to 5 tiles below this central safe zone, but ultimately it doesn't make a huge difference, as the bigger constraining issue is making sure that the outside perimeter will fit, and that the wormhole is just somewhere inside the outside perimeter. This outside perimeter, again, is 26 tiles wide and 20 tiles high, and is the maximum distance hounds might spawn. So standing on the bottom left tile of the central 4 tiles, count down 10 tiles, including the bottom leftmost central tile you started on, and dig that turf up. Then all the turf on your way to counting 13 tiles to the left, including the tile you started on. Then dig all the turf 20 tiles up, including the tile that you started on. Then 26 tiles to the right, including the tile that you started on, and then finish off the last corner, and then that's the outside perimeter done. Next, go to the bottom left central tile and count down 2 tiles, then to the left 5 tiles. On the 5th tile, dig up the turf, then dig up the turf on the 5 tiles above that tile. Next, starting from the top tile that we just dug up, count 3 tiles up and 2 tiles right. Dig this turf up. Now mirror the 2 patches of turf we just dug up, but on the other side of the 4 most central tiles, so that it looks like this. Make sure all the dug up turf isn't on top of an immovable structure like a wormhole, then it's time to build. Build Winona's G.E.M.erator in the most central part of the entire outer perimeter, which is on the crossroads of the 4 most central tiles which we marked before. After building the Winona's G.E.M.erator, place 8 catapults around the G.E.M.erator, forming a square of catapults around it. Start by placing the top, bottom, left, and right catapults as close as you can to the G.E.M.erator, then fill in the corners with the last 4 catapults. It should look like this. Now, since we'll be killing fire hounds which produce fire upon dying, we will need multiple flinger mags. But Jakey, isn't just 1 flingomatic enough? No. Only having 1 flingomatic means eventually the fire damage from all the fire hounds will kill some or all of your catapults. But with 2 flingomatics, 1 on the top and 1 on the bottom of the farm, your catapults will out-heal the amount of damage they take from the firehound fires. Unless there's lots of players close by, but we'll talk about that later. The placement of the flingomatics here is in line with the G.E.M.erator, then go down and place the flingomatics as close as you can to the catapult, then do the same but above the G.E.M.erator. Next, we need to make an entryway or 2 since you cannot walk through statues, and having to pick them up each time to enter or exit your farm is annoying. So we'll be building a toilet. or well, a ruins chair. We chose specifically the toilet skin because it's much taller than the other chair skins, so you can click on it easier when there's hounds around your farm, but it still works without the skin. The chair allows you to sit on it, then jump off of the other side, effectively allowing it to act as an access and exit point to your safe zone without allowing hounds to get through. This strategy was suggested by a Twitch viewer and community member called Mr. Mither. Thanks, gamer. The placement of this toilet is very important, as if you place the toilet too far out, hounds can squeeze by it. If you place it too far in, you won't be able to reach it from the outside. So the placement is exactly this. Position your cursor on the bottom left corner of the bottom left tile of the foremost central tiles, then move down by 5 small units. Place your chair there. Next, build yourself a second chair mirroring the left side exactly. So go to the bottom right corner of the foremost central tiles, then count down by 5 small units. Next, we need to place the statues, but to make sure the statues look neat and tidy, and to make sure they're actually placed far enough away from the catapults to stop hounds from attacking the catapults, we need to place walls first. It doesn't matter what kind of walls you use, but if you use rock walls, 1 craft costs 2 cutstone, which is 6 rocks, and it makes 6 walls. We'll be hammering these walls later, so you get all 6 rocks back. The only thing you'll lose is hammer durability. Place the first wall on the second wall unit out and away from any catapult. Then continue this for the whole perimeter of the wall. This distance is important because it will give enough of a gap between the statues and the catapults so hounds can't reach the catapults to hit them, while also keeping the safe zone tight enough so hounds don't spawn inside of it. When it comes to the chairs and flingomags, keep placing the walls in the line we've established, and the walls should just fit behind the flingomags and chairs if they were placed correctly. Once we've placed all the walls, now begins the part which might take a while. You'll need to craft 46 statues for this zone. It doesn't matter which statue you use, but pawn statues are small and short so they look nice, and since they're not obnoxiously big, you can actually see into the farm when you use those. So we're gonna use the pawn statues. Yes, wow. We'll start with packing the statues between the flingomag and the chairs, as that requires a more abnormal strategy to accomplish compared to the rest of the build. Place a cutstone, marble, or moonglass onto the potter's wheel, and then use 2 rocks to craft a pawn statue. Build 3 statues and bring them to the gap between either chair and the flingomag. Then pick up the first statue and try to move as close as possible to the flingomag. Rotate your camera such that when you hold forward, you're moving both toward the wall and the flingomag. Then hold shift and right click the statue to drop the statue. Now pick up the second statue and pack it next to the toilet chair by moving diagonally like before. Now before moving away, pick up the third statue, and now you'll notice you are clipped into the second statue. Use this to place the third statue very snugly between the first and second statue. If you don't do this clipping strategy, you won't be able to pack one of the statues in as tightly as if you did use the strategy. Then craft 1 more statue and pack it tightly against the other side of the toilet with the same camera rotating strategy. Repeat this whole strategy for the gap between the other chair and the flingomag. Doing this keeps the perimeter looking neat and tidy, while also filling the troublesome gaps between the walls and obstacles to ensure that hounds don't get pushed through. Then you must place statues around the rest of the perimeter. This is less complex than packing between objects. Simply walk between 2 walls until your character is snugly between them, then hold shift and right click the statue to drop it exactly where you're standing. Or you can equip a body armor piece to drop it exactly where you're standing. If you just right click the statue to drop it, it won't be precisely dropped. Repeat this for the entire perimeter of the walls while ignoring the corners for now. Once the whole perimeter is done, it's time to do the 2 bottom corners. These corners, you simply need to hammer the walls in the corners, then bring a statue inside the corners where the corner walls used to be, walk against the 2 other walls, then do about a half a non-Wolfgang character diagonal step animation out. That was a mouthful. Then move to the left or right a tiny bit so that the statues look equally between both of the adjacent statues. This placement is very important for both bottom corners. If you put these statues too far out, hounds will have a very rare chance to spawn inside the catapult zone. So do this for both bottom corners, and they should end up looking like a neat diagonal line on each corner. Next, we need to hammer all the stone walls so that we can actually use the toilet chairs to access the farm. At the moment, our only access point inside the safe zone is the top 2 corners, which we haven't filled with the statue yet. So go ahead and hammer a top corner wall, then hammer all the walls inside. But, very important tip, do not hold the action key or spacebar while you have a hammer equipped, as you will probably end up accidentally hammering your statues, which is a pain, because then you must remake and reposition them. So while using a hammer, actually right click what you want to destroy rather than holding spacebar. Also, don't accidentally right click the statues either. I did that while I was recording this, and man, that was annoying. Now that all the walls are gone, you can now access the farm via the toilets. Nice. So make sure they actually work and you've placed them correctly before continuing. Then finally, for the top 2 corners, bring your statue inside the corner where the corner wall used to be, then step diagonally out by moving your camera and by moving back. But only move back by about half a step animation of a non-Wolfgang character. Then hold shift and right click to drop the statue until it looks neat. Do this for both top corners. It's the same strategy as the bottom corners, so they should be nice diagonal lines. That's it! Your safe zone is complete! You can now pick up all the rocks and you should be able to hop onto a toilet and then jump off the other side to enter and exit your safe zone. Remember to comment saying thank you Mr. Metha for the epic toilet strategy, yes. Next, you can turf the area and perhaps add a Maxwell Magician chest so you can export your hound loot without leaving the farm. But this is optional, and in my opinion, I'd just keep the safe zone collision free other than the catapults and the G.E.M.erator. Otherwise, you can build lots of generic chests which have no collision and will provide lots of storage, but it does cover up a lot of the floor in the farm. So for the sake of this guide, and I want the farm to look nice, I will not be building lots of chests inside the safe zone. I will instead build them below the safe zone within the bottom Flingamag's furthest range. And I recommend that you do this as well with like Maxwell's Magician chest and the normal chest. But how many chests do I need? Well, to store 20 minutes worth of loot from the farm, you'll need a maximum of 14 small chests. Yes, you'll need up to 126 slots to store only 20 minutes worth of loot. Wow. Anyway, I think I said 15 chests at the start of the building section. I was meant to say 14 chests because I've got the math in front of me now. It's 14 chests. I'm sorry. The only other important thing with placing statues inside the safe zone is you don't want to clog the safe zone with structures which have collision so that you get stuck on them when you're trying to move around and dodge hounds. And so that when you're holding the pickup button, your character will actually pick things up and not interact with things, for example, a dress-up dummy. Alright, next are the Varg enclosures. These have quite a bit of intricate design decisions, so let's first explain the Varg's behavior and mechanics. Firstly, Vargs are wide. They take up a 2x2 wall unit area, so if their enclosure has a gap between every wall, they won't be able to fit in between the gaps in the walls. Despite that, they will still try to run between the gaps in the walls even though they can't fit. When a Varg is not aggroed on anything, it will roam randomly. Okay, so to counter this, we simply need to build an enclosure to keep them in one place. Cool. But it's a little more complicated than this. So what if we just use all walls for the enclosure? Well, that's a problem, since rarely a catapult could hit a hound when that hound is close to the front row of walls, which would damage them. And if it knocks down a wall, then the Vargs will have enough room to begin pouring out, so we can't do that, no. Also, if a hound attack happens, wild hounds can bite the walls of the enclosure if it's within their path. Then when any hound bites something or someone, it incites other nearby hounds to do the same thing. So Varg hounds that normally wouldn't bite walls will be influenced to bite the walls because of the wild hounds. And again, if they bite down enough walls, the Vargs will begin pouring out. Okay then, what if we built this enclosure with all statues? That way the Vargs can't escape because the statues cannot be damaged. Well, then something interesting happens, that being loading and unloading priority. When you get far enough away from an area, things begin unloading. Now, unfortunately, statues will unload before the Vargs. So if you walk far enough away, the statues will unload, and if you're unlucky enough, a Varg will just so happen to start roaming as the statue unloads, allowing the Varg to escape the enclosure. This could lead the Varg to attacking and destroying your catapults. Though I will note, if you teleport away, or you jump through a wormhole, everything's unloaded at the same time, so this problem doesn't happen. But just to be safe, how do we solve both of these problems? Well, firstly, we'll place the Varg enclosure as far away as possible from the catapult zone so that the wolves and Vargs have the least chance of taking damage, but while staying close enough so that the Varg's 7.5 tile howl radius does not cross over inside the catapult safe zone. If this were to happen, hounds would have a chance to spawn inside the catapult safe zone. Secondly, for the enclosure itself, we'll simply alternate between using a wall, then a statue in each wall unit of the enclosure's inner perimeter. This way, if a wall gets destroyed while the farm is running, the statue will stop the Vargs from escaping, and once you're done farming, you repair the wall, and then as you leave the farm, even when the statues unload before the Vargs will be kept in by the alternating walls. Perfect! We will do this for the entire inner perimeter of the Varg enclosure because wild hounds could bite through any of the walls on any sides of the enclosure. So since we're going to have 2 Varg pens on either side of the catapult safe zone, we need room for 8 Vargs in each Varg pen. Each Varg takes up a 2x2 wall unit area, so we need 16 wall units worth of space. We'll do one column of 8 Vargs, so the inner area of the Varg pen will be 16 wall units high and 2 wall units wide. Get ready to place your first Varg enclosure wall. Go to the left patch of turf we dug up, which is 6 tiles high. Starting from the bottom tile, go to the top right of that tile, then count 1 wall unit to the right. Place your first wall there. This wall is the most bottom right corner of your left Varg's pen's inner perimeter. Man, that was a mouthful. We will be building relative to this first wall. Remember, we need a 16 wall unit high and 2 wall unit wide inner area of the Varg pen. So place the remainder walls accordingly so that the inner area is 16 units high and 2 units wide, while alternating between skipping a wall unit so that there's a gap between each wall to put a statue in later. Once you're done, the walls should look like this. To double check, make sure the walls are centralized relative to the safe zone by turning your camera to face the Varg enclosure. You can also count the wall units within the area of the walls. It should be, like I said, 16 wall units high and 2 wall units wide. Great! Now build 20 statues with the potter's wheel again and slot them into the holes in the wall. Now, the placement of the statues is mechanically very important here, and you want it to look neat, right? So for the back row of statues, face your camera to look toward the back of the Varg enclosure, then walk into the gap between the walls until your character's hair, ears, or head slot item goes behind the walls. Then hold shift and drop your statue there. Repeat this for all the gaps on the back of the enclosure. Using a head slot item will make it easier to see when you clip behind or in front of the walls. For the side and front statues, you want to do something a little different. Face toward toward the enclosure's side that you're working on, and while holding the statue, step into the gap between the walls until your helmet clips behind them, then step back out until your hair is, or headset I am, clipped back in front of the walls. This makes it so the statue is slightly further outside of the Varg enclosure compared to the back row. This placement is important because if your statues on the sides and front of the enclosure are too deep inside the Varg enclosure, it can block the Vargs from fitting properly, as in, they will be pushed back by a few pixels, causing an extremely rare case where the Vargs are far enough away from the catapult zone so that a hound can spawn in the opposite corner of the catapult safe zone. Specifically, the two troublesome Vargs are on the top of both Varg enclosures. So yeah, this happened to me and it took a good 2 hours to figure out why it was happening. But yeah, that's the reason. A statue on the side of the enclosure was too deep inside the Varg pen, which held a Varg back from getting close enough to the catapult zone ever so slightly, causing it to extremely rarely spawn a hound in the hound pen. Thanks to Arcwell for finding the coordinate command, which greatly helped troubleshooting this issue. But to avoid this, make sure you place the statues the way I described. This in combination with your careful statue placement in the corners of the catapult safe zone will result in no hounds ever spawning inside the catapult safe zone while Vargs are in their enclosures. Though even if you didn't place the statue correctly, the scenario where one hound has a chance to spawn inside your catapult zone won't happen very often, about once every 20 minutes on average, so it's not a big deal if it does happen. Let's talk a little bit about pathing. Hounds will see walls as obstacles and try to path around them to their destination. Unless their destination is fully walled off, then they run blindly in a straight line to their destination, even if it's blocked. Statues, on the other hand, are not picked up in pathing as obstacles despite them having collision. So when hounds spawn behind the Varg pen as it is right now, they will see the gaps between the walls where the statues are and think they can go through them to get to the center of the farm. But there's statues in the way, so they'll get stuck and they won't path around. There's a plane going by, can you hear it? Even if there weren't statues in the way, the pen would be full of Vargs so the hounds wouldn't be able to get through anyway, so we've got to make sure the hounds path around the Varg pen and not through it. So simply put an outer layer of walls around the Varg pen itself, but this outer layer will have a second use, which is what the Twitch chatter, oh goodness he returns, Mr. Mither dubbed the maintenance tunnel. Basically moving the outer wall layer one unit out will allow for a one wall unit path between the outer and inner wall of the Varg pen, allowing us to do maintenance on the walls and the Vargs without having to bust down walls. Also, it will be useful for packing in the Varg layer. So build this maintenance tunnel. But then you may notice that for some parts of the maintenance tunnel, you can't walk between the statue and the outer wall you just placed. In this case, simply reposition the statue with the same instructions we used originally until you could walk by it. The statue was placed just a little too far out from the wall, causing us to get blocked. Then throw down two gates or walls on either end of the maintenance tunnel next to a wall so hounds can't get into the maintenance tunnel. If hounds get into the maintenance tunnel, it's really annoying, so yeah. Gates can set fire and break though, so I'll opt to use a wall here, which is a little more durable than a gate. Next, we'll mark the tiles in front of the Varg enclosure like this with a dominant turf, such as carpeted flooring. In fact, this turf perfectly shows how close you can get before a Varg will aggro onto you. This aggro range will be exactly where the carpet begins, so keep off the carpet and your Vargs won't aggro you. This will be very important for the next section. And that's it, you did it! Now do it all again, but on the right side of the farm for the other opposite enclosure. It's exactly the same as you just did, except mirrored onto the opposite side of the farm. So watch this section again to build the Varg enclosure on the right side of the catapult safe zone, but of course, mirror all of the instructions. Yes, wow, and then it will look like this. Wow, very cool, wow. Now it's time to build the bait pens. Bait pens, Jakey? What are those for? Well, basically, Varg hounds act differently than wild hounds, and as such, you can mostly distract them from obeying their Varg if you bait them away from their Varg with some food. The placement of this pen is slightly important because hounds will see any food within about a 7-tile radius of them. So you want the two bait pens to cover most of the main farm's area to have the option to bait hounds away while also actually pulling them far enough away from their parent Varg so that they don't try to aggro you while you're picking up drops from the farm, and to make the farm overall as safe as possible to walk around in. Now, Varg hounds only attack you if either you attack them, you get within about a 3-tile radius of their parent Varg while the child hound itself is also close by, or you just aggro their parent Varg. In all these cases, the hounds will bark and potentially come after you. Otherwise, baiting hounds away makes it easier to pick up all the drops, and it significantly reduces lag while they're baited. Since despite the parent Varg potentially being aggroed on you, the hounds are far enough away that they'll mostly ignore you, or if they do bark, you have a long enough time to react and watch to see if they start running towards you to try to attack you. So you're going to place the first bait pen 3 tiles above and 2 tiles to the right of the left Varg enclosure, which is where we dug up that patch above the Varg enclosure, yes. Then mirror this for the other bait pen near the other Varg enclosure. The bait pen should have 2 gates on the side facing inward and 1 gate on the side facing outward. The single gate is for you, and the double gate is for any hounds that get in while you're baiting or unbaiting the pen. The bait pens should have an inner area of 2x2 wall units, because giving the inner area a space of 2x2 wall units allows warthogs to teleport in and out of it if needed later. Also, you can knock down the bottom most 4 walls of each bait pen pen to the lower version of the wall to be able to see inside the pen easier. Bait these pens with whatever you want. If you want the bait to be permanent, then use something that doesn't spoil like pigskin. Otherwise, I'd advocate to build a couple of drying racks within the top Fling-O-Matic's range. You can then use these to dry monster meat into monster jerky and use as bait. This monster jerky takes 1 day to make on this rack and takes 20 days to spoil, so it's very cheap, durable bait. If you were to use monster meat for bait, it would auto stack with other monster meat in the area, causing it to effectively just teleport and move, so it's not very reliable. Placing the bait pens in this position that we have makes it very safe to bait and unbait them, as you're not close enough to the Vargs for hounds to aggro onto you. Also, of course, the main point of this is when all the hounds are baited at the pens, you can pick up all the hound drops from around the farm without being interrupted. But the bait pens are within range of the opposite end Varg's howl spawn radius, which just means a hound has a chance to spawn inside the bait pen, which isn't a big deal, as all you need to do is open the double gates of the bait pen when you start the farm to make sure no hounds get stuck inside the bait pen. Finally, everything is built and ready for operation, but we are of course missing the Vargs, so let's discuss how to find them and how to trap them. I have like multiple paragraphs in the script that go intricately about some more luring details, so if you want to read the script, go ahead and do that, but I'm not going to talk about it. Okay, cool. Packing the Vargs in. So before we can start packing the Vargs in, we have to actually get some Vargs. So normally to find a Varg, you must find a suspicious dirt pile and then follow it. When you do this, it's called a hunt, and when you complete a hunt, you have a chance to find a Varg. This chance is a small 5% on day 1 and increases until day 100 to 16.5%. But Jakey, doesn't that mean to get 16 Vargs after day 100, I'll need to do 97 hunts on average? And given that one hunt spawns every 9 minutes and 36 seconds per player means it will take 15 hours and 31 minutes or 113 days to do 97 hunts? Well, yes, but actually, no. Because how we'll acquire the Vargs is by first activating the Lunar Rifts by killing Celestial Chonkian and giving the shard Celestial Champion drops to Wagstaff, which activates the Lunar Rifts, or you can just change your Rift world settings to have them always on. Since while a Lunar Rift is active, all hunts in the world will always result in a Varg, as long as you haven't killed a possessed Varg in the current Lunar boss cycle. So now you only need to do 16 hunts, which should take 2 hours and 33 minutes, or about 19 days of in-game time to complete. But you should just keep your eyes open for hunts while you're doing other things to amass your Varg pack passively. It's worth placing down a sign to mark where your Vargs are on the map after you find them after a hunt, but while they're loaded, they do roam around, so they might have moved around, causing you to lose where they went. To be a little more mechanical, if you do a hunt without wasting too much time, you will find a Varg eating a dead koalefant. Once you see this, mark it with a sign and leave the area. Unloading the area while the dead koalefant still has meat on it ensures that while you're running away and unloading the area, the Varg won't run around, so it's easier to keep track of, because it will be exactly where you unloaded it. Now, how to trap the Vargs. Before bringing your first Varg back to the Varg Farm, you must prepare the Varg Enclosures and acquire the help of another player. Having a second player will make packing the Vargs in a lot easier and cost little to no resources. And in case anything goes wrong, bring a Pamphlu or have your second player be Maxwell so they can trap your Vargs with his Shadow Trap spell. To prep the Varg Enclosure, we need to make an opening to pack the Vargs in from. We'll be doing this by busting down 2 walls at the back of the Varg Enclosure in line with the bottommost wall of the inner Varg Enclosure. So the end of the Varg Enclosure furthest from the bait pen. Then move the statue in the path into the maintenance tunnel and bust down the final wall to allow for a 2x2 path into the inner Varg Enclosure from the outside. Then finally move the statue directly opposite from the beaten down walls from the front row of the Varg Enclosure so that you can pass through the front of the enclosure. Make sure both bait pens are baited and closed, and you can bait the safe zone too, which will help out while you're packing the Vargs in. Now let's explain and show the method to pack the Vargs in. After finding your Varg, get its attention and let it chase you. You technically don't need any speed bonus, but a walking cane would make it easier to not get hit, as the Varg does have a long attack range. You should also bring some armor like a log suit. While you're luring the Varg back to the farm, make sure to pay attention when the Varg calls in its hounds. You need to spot the hounds and make sure they follow the Varg. What you do not want to happen is a Varg spawns hounds, those hounds run away and they unload or attack something, then you run away with the Varg unloading all of the hounds. If this happens, the Varg will still count those hounds toward its maximum follower cap, and therefore the Varg won't work at maximum capacity once it's at the farm. So make sure all of the Varg's hounds are summoned and that they follow you and the Varg all the way back to the farm. Or you can just simply ignore the hounds, bring the Varg back to the farm, but then remember where the hounds got unloaded, so after you trap the Varg, you will go back to the hounds and make sure they either die or return to their parent Varg. But the important thing is, make sure the Varg summons all of its hounds before you get to the farm, because if you arrive at the farm and then the Varg calls in the hounds, depending on the Varg's position, the hounds may spawn in undesirable places, like inside the Varg enclosure on top of other Vargs, inside the bait pens, or inside the safe zone. So yeah, make sure the hounds are all spawned before you arrive back at the farm with the Varg. Once you do arrive at the farm, run 3 tiles ahead of the Varg and run such that the Varg's hounds are within a 7 tile radius of the baited bait pen. This should cause the hounds to run after the bait pen. Once the hounds do go for the bait pen, run to the back of the Varg enclosure and run through the holes you made, causing the Varg to follow you into the enclosure. Then you will exit out the front of the enclosure where the Varg cannot fit, then run towards your friend to drag the Varg away from the hole in the enclosure to make room for your next Varg. Now, once the Varg is packed in, run 10 or so tiles in the opposite direction of the Varg to lose its aggression. Yeah, Vargs have a unique way to lose aggro. You need to get a certain distance away from them. Their aggro doesn't just time out. Then, since your second player is stood within a 2.5 tile radius of the Varg outside the Varg enclosure on the carpeted flooring, the Varg will see them and aggro onto them. When the Varg does aggro player 2, its child hounds might try to attack player 2, so they must be vigilant and dodge those hound attacks until they run off to the bait pen again. The Varg being aggroed on player 2 will keep the Varg running against the front of the Varg enclosure and stop it from roaming around randomly. If you allowed it to roam randomly, it would probably end up leaving the enclosure. Now, if you have no more Vargs to pack into the enclosure, patch the walls up and move all the statues back. Now the Varg cannot escape even when it's roaming around inside the enclosure. If though you have more Vargs waiting to be packed into the enclosure, simply repeat the strategy 8 times in total to fill up the enclosure. This strategy does not change regardless of which Varg position that you're packing in. But things can get messy very quickly if someone messes up. So to see how, in a test world, I had a viewer who has never packed Vargs in with this method before help me so that we could see what could go wrong. Firstly, we noticed Vargs would attack mobs on the way back to the Varg farm, causing them to arrive damaged. This doesn't matter since the Vargs will extremely rarely sustain damage while running the farm, but we'll see an example of this later. But if they do attack something, just hit them once at the right time to get their aggro and pull them away. A second mistake was player 2 not being close enough to the enclosure to gain the Varg's aggro once it was packed in. This isn't a huge deal as the Varg would just run out of the enclosure and we could just pack it back inside. Here's where it gets a little more intricate. If a hound goes inside the enclosure, that's a problem, since if it gets sandwiched between 2 Vargs, you can't get it out very easily and now there won't be enough room for all the Vargs. The simple solution here is to make sure your hounds are baited by the bait pens before you pack the Vargs inside the enclosure. But if a hound does get stuck inside the inner enclosure perimeter, simply pull the last Varg back out of the enclosure, lure the hound out or just kill it and pick up its monster meat so that other hounds don't try to go in, then put the Vargs back in. And lastly, the absolute worst case scenario was when player 2 was not paying attention and ran behind the Varg enclosure, luring all of the Vargs out of the enclosure into the open all at once. This was absolutely hysterical because if you're paying attention, you won't do this by accident. But anyway, the Vargs then killed player 2, me, and began running around. Once they saw the catapults, they targeted and attacked them. Vargs have a very long attack range, so they can reach the catapults through the statues with their bite, which would ultimately lead to all your catapults being destroyed, meaning you have to almost rebuild the entire catapult safe zone. Make sure player 2 stays in front of the Varg enclosure to keep the Vargs inside while they're being packed in. And like I said before, once you're done packing the Vargs into the enclosure, because you have no more Vargs to pack in, or because you already have 8 in there, repair the walls with a rock and move the statues back into place while player 2 keeps the aggro of all the Vargs. That way you won't get attacked while doing all of the repairs. Good job, you packed all the Vargs into their enclosure. Now go do that for the other enclosure so you have 8 Vargs in each enclosure. It is worth saying though that you can run the farm with less than 8 Vargs in each enclosure. The farm will work just fine, you'll just get less hounds of course since you don't have the max capacity of Vargs. Finally, the farm is ready for operation. Let me explain how you should operate the farm most effectively and safely to avoid anything going wrong. First, you must prepare yourself mentally. No, I really mean it. You're going to be surrounded by up to 80 hounds at once, so you'll go insane extremely fast and stay insane without the right preparations. There are 2 items that will prevent you from going insane. The Bee Queen Crown from Bee Queen, which inverts sanity auras, or the Void Robe crafted at a Shadowcraft plinth, which negates sanity auras. But Jakey, I must kill bosses to access that equipment. That's true, you do have to kill bosses to access both of those bits of equipment. So I have one last suggestion, which, spoilers, is the best option. Wartox. Wartox gets a soul from anything that dies near him, which will be automatically picked up. Wartox can drop a soul to heal him for 20 health and 2.5 sanity. That 2.5 sanity is important. There will be up to 180 hounds dying around Wartox every minute while the farm is running, but dropping 180 souls per minute would sure hurt your fingers with all that clicking, so instead, just fill up your inventory with anything like grass, monster meat, hound's teeth, it doesn't matter. This way, when a soul tries to enter your inventory, it will be automatically dropped as you have no room for that soul, and it will grant the normal 20 health and 2.5 sanity as if you just like dropped the soul manually. Awesome! If you don't fill up your inventory and you exceed your maximum soul limit of 20, Wartox will drop some of his souls and lose sanity, which is not what we want. So doing this inventory filling method basically makes Wartox indestructible while running the farm, as he's healing for up to 3,600 health per minute along with 450 sanity per minute. This means if it's winter or summer, you can simply tank any cold or overheating damage you'll be taking along with any fire proximity damage or any time you accidentally get bit by a hound. It also makes anyone else inside the farm pretty unkillable as the souls will just be constantly healing them. So why not invite a wormwood to come watch the hound decimation, because he can use the free healing dying to craft infinite living logs. So now this Hound Farm is now a gem farm, a Hound Farm, and a living log farm. Or make it a nightmare fuel farm by inviting everyone in without any protection from the sanity drain, and then they can just tank the nightmare creatures while killing them due to all the healing. So this farm really does get you a lot of stuff. So yeah, Warthog is for sure the easiest character to use to operate this farm, but he is absolutely not necessary, especially if you don't have him already unlocked. So do not feel pressured to unlock him. Any character with either the Bee Queen crown or a Void Robe will be able to operate this farm just as effectively as Warthogs. You just need to be a little more careful about taking damage, but we will discuss this more later. Prepare the Hounds. The Hounds are currently baited to their bait pens. We want them now to instead be running against the Catapult safe zone. So drop something that is meat based and edible inside the Catapult safe zone, like some monster jerky. Then go to the bait pens, push the Hounds out of the way to gain access to the single gate, open the gate and grab whatever bait you put in there. Since it's only a one gate entrance, any Hounds behind you will push you in so that you can get to the bait before them. Now open up the double gates on the opposite side, since Hounds can spawn inside these bait pens and we don't want Hounds to get stuck inside. Once you've done this for both bait pens, the Hounds should instantly run for the Catapult safe zone. Now you are prepared with the right equipment, the Hounds are running against the safe zone. It's time to fuel the Fling-O-Matics and cast a Mooncooler Staff if it's summer, or a Starcooler Staff if it's winter. Load any kind of gem into the G.E.M.erator to fuel the catapults for 2 minutes per gem, then watch the destruction begin. The catapults will begin attacking the Hounds, causing the Vargs to aggro onto the catapults, which then allows the Vargs to use their Howl ability to call in more Hounds. These Hounds will spawn inside the outer perimeter we marked at the very beginning, and initially the Hounds will path toward their parent Varg. But since we put the Varg Enclosure's outer perimeter down, they path around the Varg Enclosure to the front of the Varg Enclosure, where they think they can get through the statues. But before they get there, they will see the monster meat that is now littering the floor around and inside the Catapult safe zone, and try to get to it to eat it. This is the endless cycle which makes the Hounds keep approaching the Catapult safe zone and dying, because there's always something edible inside of it. So make sure to at least leave the bait you placed earlier on the floor inside the Catapult safe zone, because if you pick up all the edible meat inside the Catapult safe zone, it will end in catastrophe. If there's no meat for the Hounds to go for, the Hounds will return to their parent Varg. Then the catapults will try to attack those Hounds, which will fling boulders very close to the Vargs, and this has the potential to damage your walls and your Vargs, while also killing some Hounds, which will drop monster meat near your Vargs or even inside their enclosure, causing more Hounds to go toward your Vargs, which perpetuates the issue. So to avoid this, simply do not pick up all of the bait inside the catapult safe zone. The Hounds should always be baited toward the safe zone while the farm is running. After a short while, you may notice some of your catapults stop attacking. This is because the Hounds are only very briefly targeting the catapults, then almost immediately they are instead trying to eat the food on the floor, so they're not targeting you the player or a catapult, so the catapults don't attack them. This is where you need to do something that we'll call tagging, which means you need to run around the inside perimeter of the catapult safe zone and tag groups of Hounds. More specifically, you just need to attack a Hound. By doing this, the catapults will attack what you attacked and continue to attack the Hounds. Tagging is extremely important, and the difference between tagging every few seconds and not tagging at all is huge, as eventually the catapults will just stop attacking. Here's some Excel gaming, showing you the Hound kills and tagging rate correlation for every few seconds versus 10 seconds, 20 seconds, and 30 seconds. But it basically comes down to the more you tag the Hounds around the catapult safe zone, the more Hounds you will end up killing with the catapults. And don't worry, there will be plenty of Excel gaming later. I'd recommend sticking to a pattern of tagging a Hound, then moving to the next inner face of the safe zone and tagging the next group of Hounds, and repeating this every 3 to 5 seconds, or whenever a big group of Hounds gather on one of the sides. The reason why you tag them then immediately run away is because when you hit a Hound, the Hound will try to bite you back. If the Hound lands a bite on you, it will encourage every other Hound close by to try to bite you too, resulting in an endless cycle of being attacked, unless the catapults interrupt it and kill the Hounds that attack you. But anyway, if you don't move, this will very easily stun lock and kill you. Now here's some season specific tips. If it's winter or spring, some of the Hounds will be Ice Hounds. While farming Ice Hounds, make sure to move to the next inner face of the safe zone quickly after tagging a Hound, as you can pretty easily get frozen if 2 or more Ice Hounds die at the same time, which stops you from tagging Hounds, which reduces your kills per minute. Also, if you're unlucky, the catapults will just keep killing Ice Hounds close to you, which refreshes your frozen duration. So yeah, putting down a star on each face of the inner perimeter will help, as it will thaw you out of being frozen faster, as well as getting rid of the frost that accumulates on you. So even though it's not autumn or summer, so you don't have fire Hounds, you probably want to keep the Fling-O-Matics on, because the stars might try to set fire to your catapults. If it's autumn or summer, you will get fire Hounds along with normal Hounds. When a fire Hound dies, it will explode into multiple flames. The flames will simply do rapid damage to you, non-fire Hounds, and your catapults. This is why we have 2 Fling-O-Matics. If you had just 1 Fling-O-Matic, some of your catapults would die to the fire damage, so make sure both Fling-O-Matics are always fueled and turned on in summer and autumn. But like, you may as well leave them on in winter and spring as well. Anyway, in autumn, after day 75, 50% of your Hounds will be fire Hounds, and 50% will be normal. But oddly, for summer, there's one line in the code that takes the chance of spawning a fire Hound and multiplies it by 1.5, which means during summer, 75% of your Hounds will be fire Hounds. This kind of makes sense since it's summer, so you get a higher concentration of the summer Hound, which is fire Hounds. But this line of code simply does not exist for ice hounds in winter, which I think is so bizarre. So in winter, only 50% of your hounds will be ice after day 75. We'll talk about the loot implications of different types of hounds in different seasons later, including horror hounds, as it does make a big difference in loot depending on what you kill in which season and where. Anyway, then run this farm for however long you like, except not really, because after running this farm for about 20 minutes, the Omega Nodecraft server was starting to feel the pain of all the hound's teeth on the floor, indicated by the host performance sometimes dropping from green to orange. So now let's talk about shutting down the farm. So here's the thing, you can't actually stop the farm once it's started. It is unstoppable, unless your catapults just so happen to stop attacking the hounds after some time, or you just have to wait for the G.E.M.erator to run out of gems and therefore cannot power the catapults, forcing the catapults to stop attacking. Once the catapults are powered down, you have a few things to take care of. 1, the drops all over the floor, and 2, the hounds. Wait, remember that wormhole that Gabriel told us to build close to? Okay, yeah, go jump through that wormhole and back again 6 times in total. Doing this will stack any item that automatically stacks when it becomes unloaded and loaded, such as hound's teeth and monster meat. So each time you jump through the wormhole, the individual hound's teeth all over the floor will stack up from 1 to 2 to 4 to 8 to 16 to 32, and then to the maximum stack of 40. You'll notice that after doing this, the farm will seem a lot less laggy. That's because if there were 3,500 hound's teeth on the floor, and yes, that is a realistic number for this farm, then rather than doing the pickup animation 3,500 times, which would have taken you 26 minutes, instead, you reduce the 3,500 individual hound's teeth to just 88 hound's teeth stacks, which will take you about a minute to pick up.
Jakey, wait! If you don't have a wormhole nearby, you can simply run 20 tiles away to unload your drops, then walk 5 tiles back towards your drops to load them again. Repeat walking between the 20th and the 15th tile away from your drops to stack them. This is faster than picking them up individually.
Very epic, thanks Gabriel. I'm gonna have to. There were so many pauses. That's so funny. The point. I'm gonna have to cut that together. It will sound funny. At this point, your lag is completely subsided, so you can simply power the G.E.M.erator back up to continue the farm for another up to 20 minutes before jumping through the wormhole to stack the hound's teeth again. And you can repeat this for hours. Also, if you must, you can shut down the farm immediately by jumping through the wormhole that Gabriel told us about to unload everything at the same time, which allows the G.E.M.erator fuel to drain off screen. Anyway, let's continue showing how to shut the farm down. So next to the hounds, if you try to pick up all the drops with the hounds surrounding you, 1, you won't be able to see the drops. 2, you will constantly be going insane from all the hounds, and 3, there's a chance that they decide to just turn around and kill you if you get too close to their parent Varg, which is by standing on the carpet we placed. So grab whatever bait you're using for the hounds and bait the pens. After baiting the bait pens, the hounds will still be running against the catapult safe zone, since there's still monster meat inside of it and the bait we put in there originally. So hop inside the catapult safe zone and pick everything up. Once there's no food in the safe zone, the hounds should dart towards the bait pens, though some hounds might try to path through the statues on the front of the Varg enclosures before going to the bait pens, causing them to get stuck. So to make the hounds not get stuck in front of the Varg enclosure, you simply need to reset their behavior, so that they hopefully repath toward the bait pens correctly. You can do this by either 1, unloading the area. Once you load the area, the hound's behavior resets, so like jumping through the wormhole. Or 2, stand close to the carpet so that the hounds bark and aggro you. When this happens, it resets their behavior, and they will try to attack you. But after you run a few tiles away, they will hopefully repath toward the bait pen if they're within 7 tiles of it. But sometimes they won't, and you'll need to do it again. But do not walk on the carpet itself, otherwise the Vargs will aggro you. If the Vargs do aggro onto you, or anything else like a bird, some of the Varg's child hounds might bark and come back to their Varg, which perpetuates the issue. If you allow the hounds to hug the front of the Varg enclosure, then while you're picking up the drops, they may occasionally and annoyingly bark, which means you're within their 2.5 tile aggro radius and they'll aggro you, causing you to need to stop picking up the items and run a short distance away until they de-aggro and go for the bait pens. Now, time to loot. All your hounds are baited, all your hound's teeth and monster meat are stacked, and your gems are ready for safe harvest. So pick everything up and then store it in the chests that we built nearby, or take it to the base, wherever your base may be. But Jakey, how much loot can I expect? And there's a few things you said you were going to talk about later. Is it later yet? Yes, my little sauropodlet child, it is later. No, we're going to talk about the expected drops per minute, how the drops deviate depending on your average player age and player count, along with other crunchy mechanics which I left until last to explain because they would have derailed the building part of the video because they'll take a while to explain. First of all, drops. How much loot can I expect to get? Well, that depends on a few factors, being what the average player age is in the server and how many players are within a 7.5 tile radius of the Vargs. Each of these factors increase the number of hounds the Vargs call per hound and the maximum amount of hounds a Varg can have at once, while the average player age also influences the chance of getting special hounds, aka Ice and Fire hounds. Time for Ultra Excel Gaming. Prepare yourself for lots of spreadsheets and charts. Here's an Excel spreadsheet showing you the number of hounds in various scenarios, but the main comparison I'll describe is if your player age is 15 days and it's autumn, you will get 2 hounds per howl per Varg, and 10% of those hounds will be fire hounds. That's a total of 32 hounds per howl with 16 Vargs, and only about 3 of those hounds will be fire hounds. Compare this with you having survived 83 or more days while keeping everything else the same. Now you get 4 hounds per howl, so 64 hounds with 16 Vargs, and since it's autumn, half or 32 of those hounds will be fire hounds. So due to the age of your character moving from the worst bracket to the best bracket, you will now get 10 times the amount of fire hounds. So basically this farm doesn't work at full efficiency until the average character age on the server is 83 days or more. If it's less than 83 days, then you'll still get lots of drops, just not as much. Remember, there's 2 different age brackets at play here, one for the amount of hounds per howl and one bracket for the chance at special hounds. The chance of these special hounds spawning is depending on the average player age of all players in the server, like I said. If the average age is less than 15 days, you simply cannot get special hounds. If the average age is between 15 and 29 days, you get a 10% chance. Day 30 to 49 is 20% chance, day 50 to 74 is a 33.3% chance, and finally, day 75 and higher is a 50% chance to get special hounds. Except very oddly, like I said before, in the code, no matter what the day count is, if it's summer, it multiplies the special hound chance by 1.5 times. So yeah, after day 75 during summer, you have a 75% chance for fire hounds. With that being said, from now on, we'll be talking about the loot as if the average player age is 83 days or higher for maximum hounds and special hounds. We're also assuming that there's only one player within a 7.5 tile radius of the Varg and the farm was ran with catapult activated for exactly 20 minutes. Sounds good? Okay, cool, because I did all the tests in all the seasons with these conditions and recorded all the data, including the amount of each type of hound that I killed. I was able to do this because I commissioned a community member, Kotaru, from my Discord and my Twitch community to make this mod here, which counts all of the entities that die on the server, which was very useful since it counted how many of each hound I actually killed in a 20-minute time frame. So we've got some very accurate data coming up. Anyway, the first drop we'll discuss is Hound's Teeth, the ammunition for your precious Howlitzer. Here is the beautiful result of my labor. Look at this chart. Look at it. Isn't it beautiful? The amount of Hound's Teeth you get changes drastically depending on the season. But firstly, did you know that each hound drops different amounts of Hound's Teeth? Normal hounds have a 12.5% chance to drop 1 tooth, fire hounds always drop 1 tooth, and ice hounds always drop 2 teeth. So with that in mind, it isn't surprising to see that winter and spring, which is when ice hounds spawn, are the best seasons for Hound Teeth collectors. During autumn, you get fire hounds, so get the reduced amount of Hound Teeth as they only drop 1 tooth each. While in summer, you still get fire hounds, but you get a higher proportion of them. So that's why in summer, it's slightly better than autumn for Hound Teeth. You may notice that I grouped winter and spring together because mechanically, for a Varg farm, they are the exact same season. They both spawn ice hounds at the exact same rate of 50%. Next, gems. Special hounds have a 20% chance to drop the corresponding gem. So you want to kill the maximum amount of special hounds to get the maximum amount of gems. If we recall, in summer, 75% of your hounds will be fire hounds, so unsurprisingly, summer is the best season to farm for gems since 75% of the hounds you're killing can drop gems, as opposed to the other 3 seasons where 50% of the hounds can drop gems. Though if you specifically want blue gems, it's more effective to farm in winter and spring rather than farming in summer and then having Wilson convert the red gems to blue gems. This means that red gems are easier to get and therefore less valuable than blue gems, so use red gems to fuel your G.E.M.erators. Monster meat. This was an interesting point of data, as I assumed it would be similar throughout the seasons, but boy was I wrong. Despite me killing up to 3,600 hounds in 20 minutes, I would never get 3,600 monster meat. That's because 90 to 95% of the monster meat dropped would be dropped outside of the catapult safe zone, meaning it would be eaten by other hounds. So you only get to keep the monster meat that happened to drop inside your safe zone. With that being said, here's the results. Autumn was the worst in terms of recovered monster meat, with summer coming in second to last. But in winter and spring, I recovered up to almost 60% more monster meat than autumn? But why is that? The amount of hounds I killed only deviated by up to 5% in each season, so what happened? Well, when fire hounds burst into flames, it causes the normal hounds to panic as they are not immune to fire damage, unlike fire hounds, so they'll probably die further away from the safe zone, so their meat has less chance of landing in the safe zone. Whereas ice hounds also affect normal hounds in that they will freeze them. Not only freeze them, but freeze them next to the safe zone, so that when they die, their meat has a higher chance to land inside the safe zone. So that is why me and the Twitch chat theorized why I got more monster meat in winter and spring. Now, this chart is very cool, and there's also extra data points you can look, like total amount of items on the floor and stuff. But this has all been the practical total loot acquired during the 20-minute time window where the farm was running. But now we're going to account for the total time, as in the time it took to bait the hounds, run the farm, shut the farm down, wormhole jumping, picking up all the items, and storing them all away in chests before leaving the farm ready to start again. Firstly, I'll reiterate that every test ran the farm for 20 minutes, but the inactive time, which is the setup, looting, and shutdown time, deviated a lot due to the different amount of items on the floor and what proportion of those items would auto-stack from being unloaded. So here's the chart showing the active, inactive, and total runtime for each season. You can see autumn had the least inactive time since it was the season with the least amount of items on the floor, so picking it all up took less time. Winter and spring comes in second since despite there being the most items on the floor, a higher proportion of those items were Hound's Teeth, which got auto-stacked by loading and unloading. And in last place is summer, since there is the most gems on the floor during summer out of all the seasons, and gems do not auto-stack, so you must pick pick them all up individually. And next is the beautiful, true loot chart you've been waiting for, the actual loot gain for a 20-minute session, including the entire setup, shutdown, and pickup time. This chart is still based on an actual 20-minute farming session plus the setup and shutdown time, but it has been scaled down to 20 minutes total time, so now we can see the true comparison between the loot for each season. Even though the startup time and a small portion of the shutdown time is linear and doesn't correlate with how long you run the farm for, but we will ignore that. Overall, compared to the last chart, all the numbers have been just reduced, but there are some interesting findings in this chart. Like, you kill more hounds in a winter session than a summer session, and that blue gems truly are more valuable than red gems, as you get more red gems farming in autumn than blue in winter or spring, whereas summer pulls way ahead, getting 36% more gems than autumn. Otherwise, all the statements we've said before are still true. If you primarily want hound's teeth, you should farm in winter and spring, and if you want gems, summer is superior to the other seasons. And here's the true loot per 1 minute rather than 20 minutes, based on the same 20-minute active time session, but scaled down to 1 minute, like I said. Now, if you have a player or two constantly picking up the loot, or you jump through the wormhole while the farm is running to stack the teeth, you can technically get the increased amount of loot per minute, since you don't need to end the farm, as it's just constantly running while you pick all the loot up. So here's that chart. In it, we'll see the advertised numbers that I said at the start of the video, that being 27 red gems per minute in summer, and over 180 hound's teeth per minute in winter and spring. Now, the damages. After running these tests, which totaled 6 tests, or 2 hours worth of active farm time, most of the walls on each Varg enclosure's front side were damaged, and some of them were beaten all the way down to the floor. Those ones you would need to repair. This would happen when a hound gets too close to the front of the Varg enclosure, and then a catapult attacks that hound, and then the splash damage from the catapult would hit the wall. But also during this time, one Varg had sustained damage by being hit from a single catapult, and it was the top Varg in the leftmost enclosure. This Varg got damaged because when one hound passed toward the safe zone, it stops to bark right next to the Varg enclosure, but within the range of the catapults. This hound aggroed a catapult for a brief second, and that catapult attacked the hound proactively, causing the area effect damage to hit the Varg. This happened once in 2 hours of running the farm, so it's not a big deal, as by that rate it would take about 1,355 hours of running the farm for all of the Vargs to die. 1,355 hours of running the farm in summer would result in 2,195,100 red gems, or running it for 1,355 hours in winter would result in 14,796,600 hound's teeth, which is enough ammunition to deal 1,006,168,800 damage with the Howlitzer, which is enough damage to kill 251,542 Deerclops. So this farm will survive long enough for all your farming needs, probably. Now, what if there was an alternative farm setup to allow for more loot, such as putting the farm on Lunar Island? Lunar Island is an interesting alternative location for a Varg farm, because any normal hound that dies while lunacy is active, like on Lunar Island, that normal hound has a 50% chance to transform into a horror hound, which drop 2 hound's teeth upon death, the same as an ice hound, which effectively just means you get more hound's teeth than the same Varg farm on the mainland. More specifically, between 30 and 91% more hound's teeth, depending on the season. But with the basis that lag is our ultimate limiter, and due to that fact, we decided that 16 Vargs generate an acceptable amount of lag, no more. These 16 Vargs will call in 64 hounds at a time. But if we then build this Varg farm on Lunar Island, and it's autumn, there's 1 player on the server, and they have survived more than 83 days, each Varg will call in 4 hounds each howl, totaling the same 64 hounds. Then on average, 50% of these hounds will be fire hounds, meaning 2 hounds per howl are normal hounds, and on average, one of these normal hounds will transform into a horror hound upon death, which means you're effectively dealing with 25% more hounds, or the equivalent of having 20 Vargs worth of hounds in the farm on the mainland, increasing lag above the acceptable level. You can now start understanding the issue. We're dealing with more hounds, which introduces more lag, so to reduce the amount of lag to an equivalent of 16 Vargs on the mainland, we must use 13 Vargs in a Lunar Island Varg farm, which ultimately means we're sacrificing normal and special hound spawns for horror hounds, which loot-wise means we'll get between 6 to 55% more hound's teeth in a Lunar Island farm than a Varg farm on the mainland, 6% more hound's teeth in summer, 55% more in autumn, and 20% more if it's winter or spring, but at the cost of reducing the gem output of the farm to 81.25% of the mainland farm year-round. So yeah, to keep the equivalent amount of lag, you're sacrificing the gem output of the farm to increase the tooth output. Not worth it in my opinion, unless you truly don't care for the extra gems and value the hound's teeth per minute, in which case go crazy and build the farm on Lunar Island. All the concepts are exactly the same, and you don't have to worry about going insane. But also, getting the Vargs to Lunar Island means you either need to teleport them, which uses a lot of purple gems, or build a long dock bridge to the Lunar Island to get them there. Also, there's no wormholes on the Lunar Island, so you can't use the wormhole unloading trick to stack the hound's teeth quickly, which will significantly slow down picking up of all the hound's teeth, which defeats the whole purpose of the Lunar Island farm, and this time loss is not accounted for in the synthetic Lunar Island Varg farm charts. So it's an interesting idea, but it's just not as practical as a mainland farm. But Jakey, what about a possessed Varg farm? So me and my elite team of gamers tested this, and the TLDR is Yeah, doesn't seem to work that well. At least you don't have to worry about seasonal giants on Lunar Island, right? Oh right, seasonal giants. On the mainland, your farm is very susceptible to seasonal giants. Bearger can destroy every part of your farm, including killing the Vargs. Same thing with Deerclops, except with Deerclops, if she spawns nearby, she will specifically go to the nearest structure and begin destroying things. So she will target your farm more so than Bearger. Moos can also attack your walls and kill your Vargs. And when Antlion attacks, if you don't pull the attack away from your farm, it will destroy your farm and prevent you from repairing it until after the sinkholes disappear. But all of this is easily avoidable by leaving your farm when an Antlion attack begins to happen, not building close to a Moos nest, and when you hear Bearger or Deerclops about to spawn, just jump through your wormhole. As long as the wormhole is within the outer perimeter, then it's close enough to the farm such that the whole farm is unloaded at once when you jump through it. So nothing funky will happen, such as things burning off screen, nor hounds clipping through the statues of your safe zone. So even if your farm is still running, but you hear Deerclops or Bearger, just run for the wormhole and jump through it to spawn them on the other side of the wormhole. If you don't have a wormhole, then unlucky. You gotta hope that you find Bearger or Deerclops before they find your farm. Otherwise, running away and unloading the area while the farm is still running might cause some issues, such as things burning or hounds getting into your safe zone, but it's better than a giant destroying your entire farm. Also, any teleport far enough away will also unload the whole farm at once, same as a wormhole, like Warthog's using the map to teleport far away, or Wander using a backtrack watch to teleport far away. Speaking of destruction, if a hound attack happens while your farm is still running, then there shouldn't be much of a problem. The worst that would happen is a wall or two get bitten and destroyed. But if a hound attack happens while your farm isn't running, then get the hell out of there. Since, like I said, if a wild hound bites you or a wall, it will encourage every hound, even the Varg Hound nearby, to attack the same thing, which can result in lots of wall destruction and your death. This includes biting down the bait pen so that there's nothing baiting the hounds, so that they're just running around wild. But even if this happens, the statues will stop the Vargs from escaping, you just have to rebait all the hounds. Now, multiplayer. If you have more than one player in the farm, you will get more hounds overall since there's more players nearby. This is good, but when it's summer, you also get the higher concentration of fire hounds. This can, quite rarely, but still, cause the fire from this increased amount of fire hounds to make your catapults take too much fire proximity damage, despite the Flinger Max putting the fires out as fast as they can. The catapults have 400 max health and regenerate 8.3 health every 10 seconds. Thanks, Don't Starve Wiki. You don't want the catapults to run out of health and break, since then you would need to rebuild that part of the farm. Although, 99.9% of the time, your farm will be fine to run for 20 minutes or longer, even with multiple players nearby. As when I tried to replicate the catapults dying to fire damage, even with 5 players close by, I couldn't get them to take enough damage. So it seems you require it to be summer with multiple players, and you have to run the farm for longer than 20 minutes, and you must just get unlucky. Then fires might do enough damage to kill a catapult. In one of my Mega Base worlds, one of my catapults in the Varg Farm did die, but like I said, I couldn't replicate this on the test world, so you probably don't need to worry about it, as you need to get incredibly unlucky for it to happen, and you definitely don't need to worry about it if there's just one player close by.
So you can make a variation of the Varg Farm to also use the Vargs to farm moon rocks during the Moonstone event. Since while the Moonstone event is active, so during a full moon with the Starkle staff plugged into the Moonstone, all pigs and hounds, even special hounds, nearby will be transformed and become hyper aggressive, then they will try to destroy the Moonstone. This includes converting all of the Varg's hounds. These now moon hounds are untethered from the Vargs, causing the Vargs to call in more hounds. Then when the event finishes, the moon hounds are turned into Moonstone. The farm is almost the same design, just a few simple changes. Firstly, you need to make room for the Moonstone itself, which is done by creating a small box of statues around it with the farm centered below the Moonstone. The Flinger Mags are moved to the sides of the farm, and the whole farm is now central to one tile. Meow. Rather than the other design, which is centralized with 4 tiles. Did you hear Mr. Skruffles meowing? He's meowing. You want to go outside? Doing this will get you 400 or so moon rock per Moonstone event, but the event will fail most of the time since there's so many hounds pushing against the statues, it will cause some hounds to get pushed through, even if you use the clipping strategy we used before to pack more statues in than usual. But there is a solution. So first, if you want to farm moon rock, you must aggro the Vargs before the Moonstone event begins, so make sure you don't get too far away. But if you actually want a Mooncrawler staff, so you want the event to succeed, then simply do not aggro the Vargs before the event begins. This will allow the Vargs to go to sleep when the nights start, and therefore the Vargs will not call in any more hounds. So the hounds won't push through to break the Moonstone because there's not enough of them. Lastly, the hyper aggressive hounds will bite walls sometimes, so you'll need to do some repairs and bait the safe zone before you start the event. Otherwise, I'm not diving too deep into this design. Its purpose is just to get extra use out of the Vargs that you already have. Otherwise, you could just build 2 separate farms. Anyway,
yeah, that's basically a very epic farm. Thanks to my Twitch community for help testing this farm to all of its design iterations on stream, and thanks Gabriel for the original inspiration for the farm and for suggesting design improvements to the farm, like the wormhole stacking strategy. Yes. Yeah. So, what do you think, Gabriel? What do you think?
It's overkill and I love it.
So does this get the Gabriel stamp of approval?
Yes, it does.
Woo!
I love it.
I love it. Do you love it as much as me?
Yes, I love it like the son I never had.
Woo! If you have any questions, leave them down in the comments and I will assist you. Yes. Thanks Red Magic for sponsoring the channel for a second time. That is very cool. Check out their new phone, Red Magic 9 Pro, and also leave a comment about what video you want next, because I don't know what I'm doing next. Anyway, I'm leaving now. Merry Christmas and happy holidays, my children. Goodbye. Oh hey, Willow and Wicked got their skill tree.
Hello, Varg Farm enthusiasts.